My name is Ian Nockolds, and I am the local council advisor at the Wiltshire Association of Local Councils. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening on this special session about introducing you to what life is like on our town and parish councils. Just to give you an overview, the session will be broken down into 3 sessions. The first session will be our speakers, which is Councillor Chloe Stevens, Teresa Strange, and Henry Powell. After they have made their presentations, there will be an opportunity for questions. Now, the questions will be part of the recorded session, but I do appreciate that recorded and being part of the webinar might not be everybody's cup of tea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording so that we have an opportunity for people who wish to raise questions towards the end of the session if you don't wish to be part of our recording. There we go. So just as a way of introduction to myself, obviously I run the Wiltshire Association of Local Councils. Our role, we are a membership organisation, and we represent 246 town and parish councils across Wiltshire and Swindon. Obviously, the elections this year are only taking place in Wiltshire. Next year, there will be elections in Swindon. An important part of what we do is provide information and guidance to our councils. That's both council officers and councillors. And perhaps the most important thing that we provide is training. And given that we have the elections coming up this year, it's very important that we have a full range of training provision in place for new councillors after the May election. So if elected, then there will hopefully be courses available to help sort of flesh out some of the themes that we'll be talking about this evening. One of the other things that we offer is networking opportunities. We have a conference that we do every year, and also for council chairs and for council officers, we provide regular online networking opportunities, and that basically an opportunity a little bit like this evening, an opportunity to sort of share questions, share experiences, see if other people have had the similar problems and what they may have done to overcome them. And then I've put the other sort of function of the association is lobbying. It's probably a little bit highfalutin, really. What we do, I think, very well is we do engage and network with a number of other organisations. Obviously, Wiltshire Council is one of those, and we're very sort of proud to support a lot of the initiatives, some of which Henry will talk about. But obviously, when it comes to things like flood prevention, neighbourhood plans, there's lots of other organisations that can support the work of our town and parish councils, and I aim to sort of provide access to those organisations through the association. So that's what I do, but you didn't really turn up this evening to find out what I do. So I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, which is Councillor Chloe Stevens, who is the chair or chairman, as it says on their website, of Market Lavington Parish Council. So Chloe, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ian, and thank you everyone for joining us. It's great to see so many of you have taken interest. I will apologise before we start because, as well as being a councillor, you still have to family at the same time. And so if we have people coming through, I apologise for any noise, but that's life. Ian, this is your moment. The first slide, please. Why I wanted to become a councillor. That was, for me, it was very simple. Initially, it was my daughter, the most important person in my life. And secondly, the fact that I'm easily frustrated by situations and I find myself looking for ways to overcome them. When my daughter was a reception child, we'd walk to school every day and see obstacles or problems. I'm a wheelchair user. I have multiple sclerosis, so I probably see more problems than most, and they become more apparent. That doesn't mean I didn't want to fix them. At the time, another mum at school, she was a counsellor, and I would chat with her about the need for change, and I'd ask her about the role of the parish council, and that's where my interest started. I realised there was an opportunity to gain actual positive from my health situation and from my lived experience. And it was an opportunity to give back to the community and maybe provide a voice for people who didn't feel that they could speak up. So that was initially why I wanted to become a councillor. Second slide, please. Reality versus expectations. This is difficult bit and something personally I've had to learn to deal with over time. Can we change the world? No. Can we make everyone's requests that come to the parish council happen? No. But we can make an impact and go a long way to making people feel heard. And sometimes with people, that is all it takes. You have your constant problems, the everyday things, the dog mess, the speeding, vandalism, but these have always happened and may not entirely go away. But they're problems that matter to people, and we just keep on top of those. Sometimes, even with a great team around you, you can have expectations of success, but projects aren't always achievable. However, we do make little wins every day. And honestly, in how many jobs can you have that satisfaction, especially when it's somewhere that you personally feel passionate about, your own village where you chose to live? That's one of the main feelings for me. I'll be honest with you though, there are times when it is difficult. There's no point in me saying it isn't, but those times genuinely, they're few and far between. Another reality check for me personally was due to the necessity with Parish Council to follow process, policy, and procedure. Thank you. The enthusiast in me can find that really, really difficult. But as Henry will say later, you have to follow those items if through Parish Council as we represent everyone correctly. But the results are worth it as soon as you follow process, policy, and procedure. The outcome is what everyone needs and wants. Next slide, please, Ian. Oh, an owl. Okay. How you make a difference in your community. As I've said previously, you can be the voice for people that maybe aren't confident to speak up. And with your team around you, you can make improvements that people genuinely want. How can you make a difference? I'd say be visible and be available. They're the two things that I feel are the most important about making a difference in your community. There's little point in being thought of as those people who sit around a table making decisions and have little impact on the concerns of parishioners. By going to the pub, which is perhaps a favourite of mine, or the local shop, or walking the dog, or taking your children to school, these are ways that people get to know who you are and in turn get to know how you want to help them, and you will find out what really affects people's lives. Being a wheelchair user and a mum, it's made my life experiences given me the ability to see things differently to those who've taken the chair before me. Talking to everyone has always driven my daughter mad, but it's gone a long way to building up relationships throughout the village. It's helped me improve road safety, access issues, community engagement, working with youth groups and schools. To date, my biggest personal achievement has been the installation of sports equipment voted on by the school and the whole village. We still have plenty to do, but these achievements have a big impact. You can have an impact on planning, finances, highways, infrastructure, and community. Whatever your skill set, there is a place for you at a parish council as a councillor. When you take the role as a councillor, you are in a position to hopefully take people's concerns or irritations on board and find ways, if it's possible, and with the help of the unitary council, where appropriate, to fix them. It's genuinely a very positive feeling when you can answer your parishioners' questions. Next slide, please, Ian. The role of the chair. This has been a real eye-opener to me. And as I said, I've only been doing this role for a year, but it's one I very much enjoy. As chair, we have specific duties relating to meetings, but the role doesn't provide me with any more authority than any other councillor. In practical terms, my job is ensuring meetings run smoothly and that we have positive debates, and those debates happen in an honest, open and safe way. Managing meetings and the consistency of introducing agenda items and inviting members to speak, focusing discussion and clarifying matters are all part of our jobs as the chair. This can be rewarding and lively, depending on the strength of feeling on topics. I have had to chair a meeting when we've had nearly 150 people in a room, and that can be daunting, but with the team around you, you do make it happen, and the outcome is really you feel good at the end of it because you've made all those people feel that they've had a voice. I was informed before I took on the role as chair that anyone can be chair as long as they have a good team around them, and that is the main skill you need in the role of chair, to recognise the strength of others and delegate to those who know more, which in my case is most people. But micromanaging is not what you want to do as chair, and you must never think you know how to do things for the best, because you are part of a team. So that would be, in summary, my role as a chair. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chloe. Now, you may have questions about what Chloe has said, but in order to help us keep to time, we have an hour between 6 and 7. If you can make a note of any questions, and then what we'll do is we'll have a time for questions after we've had our 3 presentations. So thank you very much, Chloe. And now we'll move on to Teresa Strange, the clerk and RFO at Melksham Without Parish Council.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Teresa.
Great. Okay, so yes, I'm Melksham Without, a clerk and RFO of Melksham Without Parish Council. We're a large parish. We have 5 villages and a population of about 7,500. So we're quite big as a parish. And I'm also the chair of the Wiltshire and Swindon branch of the SLCC, the Society of Local Council Clerks, and that's the professional body for clerks. And the branch in Wiltshire and Swindon covers about half of those 246 parish and town councils that Ian mentioned. Okay, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the role of the clerk. We're not just someone who takes a few notes and makes the tea. Clerks are a professional role. They require specialist knowledge and a range of skills. We are jack of all trades, and I hope we don't profess to be master of all of them, but some of them. We're employed by the council to manage its activities and to provide admin assistance and advice. And the key word in that sentence is employed. So we're not volunteers, we're not councillors, we're not anybody that's just picked up a pen in the meeting. It's an employed role of a council. We're the proper officer. That's a legal term, and it doesn't matter whether you're a clerk of a really small parish council that works 3 hours a week, or whether you're the CEO of Salisbury City Council, you're still the clerk. They quite often call themselves in the bigger functions CEO, Chief Executive Office, and they might have a fleet of staff under them, but the function is the same. The clerk is the same, whichever those councils and everyone in between. Council also must legally appoint an RFO, a responsible financial officer, and as the name implies, we're responsible for managing the finances. Sometimes, particularly in parishes, the clerk and the RFO are the same person. I am both, but not always, and I have had different roles at this council and been just the RFO. And then the next slide, please. So there's a big list there of the role of the clerk. We advise on legal matters. We administer the council's finances. We organise all the council's procedures, which Chloe's enlightened to. There's lots of procedures. We gather information to help the council make decisions. We do a lot of research. There's absolutely no point a council meeting, making a decision to do something and then finding out afterwards they haven't got anything in the budget to do it, or legally they can't do it. So the clerk's there to gather that information to help the council make its decisions. It raises the profile of council in the local community. Quite often we're sometimes, not always, councillors as well, but particularly those that have an office or a PO box, you're the main point of contact for parishioners, and sometimes the face of the council. We guide the council as it engages with residents. Some of those things about what you can and can't do. We negotiate with other organisations, whether that's highways, Wiltshire Council, developers, community groups, all sorts of contractors, all sorts of people. We do that. We implement the council's decisions. We are the people that take the action, and when the council has made a decision to go forward with a project or decision or not. And then we manage the council projects, whether that's installing, as you saw, some sports equipment or village halls, or everything in between. And then moving around, so just a bit about how council meetings work. Council meetings are where it happens. That's where the action is at. It's where the decisions, which in council worlds are called resolutions of the council, are made. And the council can only make decisions at formally called meetings and by the councillors who are there physically present. It seems mad when we're here talking on Zoom that you can't, and we have the technology to do that, but the law hasn't changed. Well, it actually changed in COVID and then reverted back. So decisions can only be made, not by email, not by chatting in the pub. They have to be made by the council at the formal meeting, and only by those that are physically in the room and sat at the table. They're formal events. They're not social occasions. Nobody's saying you can't have a chat and a good team and a chat and a cup of tea before or after, but the council meetings are formal events. They have a really clear purpose, and that is about making decisions. They're not a talking shop. They're not for having a chat. You're making decisions for the benefit of the community, and that's aided by the agenda, which I'll talk about in a minute. Minutes, the notes that the clerk makes, the minutes record the decisions and any relevant information to the kind of collective decision. So they're not a verbatim record. Please, if you stand and become a councillor and write eloquent speeches, they won't be recorded in the minutes. The minutes will say that the members looked at these things for, these things are not against, and on balance, this is what they voted for, and the decision was X. They're not going to be a transcribe of what was said. The meetings are open to the public and the press. There are some exceptions for sensitive things. You don't want to expose legal or contractual negotiations, staffing issues because of data protection, and we hold those in a closed session. But you have to have a clear reason and the council vote on what that is. You can't just exclude the public and press because you don't want them to find out about something, or because you think you might not like what you're discussing. There has to be a clear legal reason why you're doing that. And not all of the meetings for everyone. So some councils might just have full council meetings, but you can also have committees and working parties. We have them for planning, finance, highways. So not all council meetings are for everybody, and there's a thing about delegated powers. Some committees can make decisions on their own, like submit comments to planning applications, and other things. They can make recommendations. They do a lot of work and research, bash around the ideas, come up with a recommendation, and then go back to the full council. And then moving on, we're just talking about the onerous procedures, which Chloe alluded to earlier. Standing orders are the rules for the ways that meetings are conducted. It gives the really clear rules for debate of how you have a proposer and a seconder, how you amend something that has been proposed. Those of you that can remember Jackie Weaver, which went viral during COVID, and a councillor shaking his fist and a bit of paper and saying, read your standing orders, know your standing orders. I think civility and respect is something that's being covered a bit later, but you must know your standing orders. The chair, I won't talk about that bit because Chair Chloe's elegantly described what the chair does. Having a really good chair managing the meeting is key. Councillors vote for or against proposals, usually by a show of hands, and then you can abstain. Minutes record the decisions of that council. Councillors, as you move forward, if you are councillors, keep your contributions brief. Agendas can be long. Having everybody the chance to hear different views is good. And it should all be good humoured. At the end of the day, you're all there as volunteers working for the benefit of the community. So coming away with an uneasy feeling that people haven't got respect for other people's views isn't the forum that we want at all. And then very quickly, just to talk about agendas, and they are important because they give that clear process. Councillors have a duty to attend meetings. You're not invited to a council meeting, you're summoned to remind you of your duty to attend. And if you're not able to attend, then you need to send your apologies and explain why, which can be accepted or not. And they are important records, because if you fail to attend for 6 months without having those apologies accepted, you're automatically disqualified as a councillor. The agendas are published with the correct clear days notice, and that gives you as councillors time to read papers, canvass residents' views, have that conversation in the shop and the pub on the walk to school, and allows time for councillors to prepare for meetings. It also lets the public know what's being discussed, so they can attend, make their views known, let their councillor know what they think about something. The unintended consequence is what you will find out. For everybody that thinks having double yellow lines somewhere is a good idea, it pushes the cars somewhere else. Everybody who thinks a bus shelter or a bench is a good idea, somebody else thinks it's a magnet for antisocial behaviour. That you'll find that for most things that are proposed, there is always an unintended consequence or an opposite view. The agendas, agendas detail what can be discussed. So to allow everybody to prepare and know what's being discussed, you can only talk about things that are on the agenda. So it can be frustrating if there's a massive burning issue that's blown up over the weekend that isn't on the agenda, you can't discuss it. If members of the public come in public participation and raise something, you can't discuss it, because not all sides not all the public and councillors have had a chance to have a think about that and ability to be able to come to the meeting. There is no such thing as AOB, any other business, at a parish council or town council agenda, because nobody will have had a chance to prepare for that. The agenda includes a period for public participation, but just remember it's a council meeting that the public can come and attend, and they can speak their piece, and then it goes back into the council meeting. This is not a public meeting and a talking shop. It's the council meeting for councillors, and the public are attending. That is a subtle difference. And then the last one, what parish councils can do and what they can't do. And so regardless of size and level of activity, whether you, as I say, you're Broughton, Gifford or Market Lavington Parish Council or Salisbury City Council and everyone in between, you all have the same statutory duties in law, appointing a clerk, a finance officer. Most of the legal requirements about talking about public finance, how you set your precept, which is you set your budget, and then the precept is the income that's collected through the council tax by Wiltshire Council, audit arrangements. There's things you have to do, but there aren't very many things you have to do as a council. But there's lots and lots of scope for things that you can do, as long as you've got a legal power to do it. So most of the Local Government Act is from 1894 and 1972. There are lots of laws about whether you can keep allotments, which came from the war, which allow people to keep rabbits so they can eat them, because that's when the law dated from. There's a bit more streamlined and easier law, which is the general power of competence, which was designed to make it a bit easier, and that's for eligible councils. And you can basically, as a council, do anything an individual might legally be able to do. And that is important, because it allows, certainly for this parish council, you can look at supporting bus services, which there wasn't a power for, or we're providing some funding for, after COVID, Age UK, working with elderly people who were clearly lonely and in need of some help before COVID and still need it. So they're things that you might not have legal power for. To be eligible for that, 80% of your councillors must be elected and not co-opted, and the clerk must be qualified. but it does allow you that scope to do more. So taking a breath, I've talked about all of the rules. That is the role of the clerk, to know the rules, know what parish councils can do legally, know how to find the money and resources, and be a conduit for the public through to what councillors want to do and back doing those decisions. But it's important the rules are there. You're spending public money and it's part of a democratic process. So you have to do that transparently, and you have to be careful about how you spend other people's very hard-earned money. And so it should be, and that's what the clerk's to do. But you can do amazing things. We had 50 odd people at our annual parish meeting on Monday, and the range of groups and organisations and things that the parish council do, getting community benefit from planning applications, allotments, funding St John's Ambulance, the whole really wide range of support. And that's not just money, whether that's advice or encouragement, projects that the councils have done, decisions that they've done, neighbourhood plans. It's very, very rewarding. So in the words of Nike, just do it. If you're thinking of applying, just do it.
Teresa, thank you very much indeed for that. I do know, everybody, that obviously there's a huge amount of sort of information that we've covered already, and we've still got Henry to come. But please make a note of any questions that you might have, and after we've heard from Henry, then we'll go into an open question session. But I'll introduce Henry now. Henry Powell from Wiltshire Council. Over to you, Henry.
Thanks, Ian. Evening, everyone. Very nice to be here. So my name's Henry Powell. I'm the Democracy and Complaints Manager at Wiltshire Council. I've worked at the Wiltshire Council since it was formed in 2009 and a couple of the district councils before that, always with local councillors. And in the last couple of years, I've entered the arena of complaints, including about councillors and therefore the issue of councillor conduct. So that's why I'm here. Thank you, Ian. So it's not going to shock anyone here, I don't think, to say that the public and the media, politicians' behaviour is a source of ongoing fascination and sometimes outrage. Often not fairly, I would say, sometimes fairly. But that's the reality we live in, and therefore it's part of the reality you would be kind of entering if you were elected as a parish and town councillor. Fortunately, local councillors are held in higher esteem in terms of trust and integrity by the public than national politicians, but it's still not great. I think there was research last year that said members of the public thought that local councils had the biggest impact on their lives locally, but only 42% trusted local councillors or something like that. So your behaviour, your conduct, if you are elected, is an important part in your own small way of improving that picture. So to start breaking down the kind of conduct regime, every local council has to have a code of conduct in place for its councillors, and those codes of conduct must align with what are sometimes called the Nolan principles, or the 7 principles of conduct in public life. You can look them up, but they include openness, leadership, integrity, etc. So there is a degree of local discretion around these codes of conduct that all councillors are bound by. But the LGA, the Local Government Association, has produced a model code quite handily, which a lot of local councils have adopted or are adopting. And that sets out the requirements of councillors' behaviour, and includes things like not being disrespectful, not bullying, harassing, not disclosing confidential information. And there is a particularly important section on councillor interests. So if you have any pecuniary, i.e. financial interests, and sometimes other interests, you can be required to recuse yourself from a discussion. And in some cases, it can be a criminal matter if you fail to do that. It's important to note that these codes of conduct only apply when one is acting in their official role as a councillor. It doesn't imply when you're chatting to a friend, but it does apply if you're acting as a councillor. However, when you are considered to be acting as a councillor can be a kind of subtle decision. You don't necessarily have to be at a council meeting or to be waving your council badge around for it to be decided that you are acting in your official capacity. So I'll touch on that later. Next slide, please, Ian. So handling complaints about councillors. So principal authorities, in our case, which is Wiltshire Council, is responsible for handling all complaints about councillor conduct. So sometimes if they have a concern about councillor behaviour, they'll go to the parish or town council, but they should then be referred on to us, because legally it has to be us who looks at the matter. Last year, we received about 80 complaints about local councillors rather. So if you consider in Wiltshire, there's about 200 odd parish councils with, you know, many councillors on each. That's not that bad. We investigated about 10 of those complaints. And when I say investigated, that's quite a detailed investigation. And there was only about 3, well, exactly 3, where we actually found that the code of conduct had been breached. So quite a lot of complaints about councillor conduct get assessed and kind of triaged out because we don't think they are valid or don't meet the threshold, or they just haven't provided enough information for us to assess them. Or, for example, we don't think the person was acting in their councillor capacity when they did whatever the person said they did. If we do get a complaint about a councillor's conduct, the councillor always gets the chance to respond to that complaint before we take it further. And rather than kind of spending public money on investigations and things, we do quite often try and explore other ways of resolving concerns by asking councillors to apologise or undergo a bit of training or something like that. Even if you have a complaint made against you as a councillor, even if you end up not having been found in breach of the code, it's a relatively unpleasant thing to go through. So I find a preventative approach is probably best, and it's worth thinking about how to avoid being seen to breach your code. Thanks, Ian. So what kinds of complaints do we get about councillor behaviour? I would say the most common one is about councillors being rude or disrespectful. Most often, not always, but often more recently on social media. I will come on to that. Also, we have complaints about councillors' behaviour during meetings, particularly if they're the chair. That's kind of to be expected, because if you're the chair, you're in charge of who talks and who doesn't. You're in contact with more members of the public than other councillors, so you are more exposed. Another one is a failure to disclose interests, often around planning. So sometimes members of the public might see a councillor vote on a planning matter and they will think, hang on, that person lives down the road from that planning matter. That's not right. They will often make a complaint about it. We actually take quite a narrow definition of the rules around that, and it wouldn't necessarily be a valid complaint, but members of the public often assume it is. Also failing to be sufficiently open about your decisions. I think members of the public quite often, if they disagree with a decision, they expect you to explain why. That's fair to a degree, but it can go too far. Also, members of the public, if they believe a councillor has lied, we'll get complaints about that. And quite often we get complaints if a councillor just hasn't replied to several emails. We don't actually consider that a conduct issue. It might be annoying, but it's more a matter of councillor performance that people can make a judgment on when they go to the ballot box next time. Next slide, please, Ian. Thank you. So where a complaint is made about a councillor, about their behaviour, if we decide that it deserves to be investigated, and then it goes all the way to a subcommittee of Wiltshire councillors who look into it, and they make a judgment that the code of conduct has been breached, they can impose, or in the case of parish councillors, recommend a variety of sanctions. The code of conduct regime is it's not toothless, but it's not far away from being toothless. So it's quite a limited range of sanctions that we can impose. The first one is censure, which is basically a formal telling off in public in the form of the meeting minutes. Requirement to undergo relevant training. The Wiltshire Council might ask the Parish Council to remove the councillor from certain committees. In extreme cases, the parish council might decide to ban the councillor from certain buildings if they've done something in a building and there seem to be some sort of threat to the staff in there or something. They can do that. There is no power at the moment to suspend or remove councillors from office. But central government is currently consulting on a stronger regime that might introduce those. So it's another reason to take conduct seriously. Thank you, Ian. So in Wiltshire, we are aiming to be the best council, the best county in terms of councillor conduct and what we call positive conduct, positive democracy. So we have launched a campaign and we've done a few things under this campaign. One is we held a webinar a little bit like this, and I think the video is still available on our web pages, which I'm sure Ian will circulate the link to. We've produced a very handy toolkit, which is like a document about 5 or 6 pages long, and it's full of guidance, full of tips, and full of links to other resources all about avoiding conduct issues. And that's available on that web page there. We also encourage local councillors to sign our positive conduct, positive democracy charter, which is basically a commitment, a personal commitment to say, I care about integrity and the perception of integrity and good conduct in public life. And so I will be an ambassador for it. Thank you, Ian. So a few tips before I conclude, in case you are elected. The first tip I would give you, based on my experience, is just to think about conduct. Some people get elected, they sign their code of conduct without perhaps reading it or thinking about it. It is worth spending an hour or two thinking about the code, reading it properly, and thinking about what it means for you. Also thinking about your capacity all of the time. So if you're ever in a position where you think, am I acting as a councillor now, or am I acting as a private individual? And sometimes that can be quite a difficult judgment. It's worth making clear to those around you what role you consider yourself to be acting in. So if you're speaking at a public meeting as an individual member of the public, whilst you might also be a councillor, it's worth pointing that out. A higher standard I've put there. Quite often in complaints about councillor conduct, the councillor may feel they've been provoked by a member of the public by their poor behaviour, and sometimes that does appear to be true, but councillors are held to a higher standard by the standards regime. So even when provoked by challenging people within reason, obviously it's always worth remembering that you are in a different position as an elected person. In terms of respect, which as I say is the most typical complaint we receive, you're able to challenge people robustly as a councillor. That's part of public life and debate, but try and avoid personal attacks, as I say, even when somebody might be attacking you, verbally I mean. Using social media, as I say, we get more and more complaints about this. This is an area where it's particularly easy to forget what role you're acting in, or what role you might be perceived to be acting in. Good rule of thumb, if you wouldn't say it in a meeting or on the phone or face-to-face, best not put it on Facebook, etc. as a councillor. Interests, these are really important because there is a criminal side to this. Do understand the requirements by reading the guidance, the government guidance thoroughly. And if you're in any doubt, register your interest and declare it in meetings if you think it might be an issue. Final slide, I think, from me. So formal tips, planning matters. Planning is the source of a lot of emotion and controversy at a local level. So it's worth taking extra care with your conduct and what you say publicly. And when you're considering planning applications or talking about them, it's always best to stick to planning considerations rather than anything about the individuals involved, and you won't go far wrong. If you end up being a chair and chairing meetings, as I say, you do have a higher profile. If there's somebody in a meeting that is causing issues, obviously, as far as you can, try to remain empathetic and express that. but also get to know your council standing orders, so you know what the rules of debate are, because you are able to have people removed or ask them to leave, and you are able to ask them to stop speaking. Act early, issue spiral. If you genuinely want to be an ambassador for good behaviour in public life, then look around you when you become a councillor and think, am I happy with this conduct, or do I need to have a little word with the chair, the clerk? Is there anything I can do if something doesn't seem quite right? Finally, seek help. WALC is always there for advice, as Ian I'm sure will say. And I think that is my final slide.